Good morning. In the late 1990s, I was stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky as a chaplain. And at Fort Campbell, you run. And if you run at all, you run 4 miles. Sometimes you run more. And there was one route that I would run with other soldiers at times that culminated at a hill, which was named Bigger Man Hill. And for a long time I thought it was because if you made it up that hill, you were a bigger man. But eventually I learned that it had been named after someone named Biggerman. But it was a 5-mile run, and when you came to the end of that 4th mile, if you were running with someone and you were running somewhat competitively, you were starting to get tired. The challenge was to sprint that last mile, which was entirely up that hill. You didn't do that just because you thought, hey, that'd be a great idea. You had to prepare to do that. You had to have the physical stamina, but not only the physical stamina, but the emotional strength still within you to make it up that hill for that 5th mile. And sometimes when I ran it with others, I reflected on this passage from Joshua chapter 14. And when I came to the end of the 4th mile and started the 5th, and we started going up that long, steep hill, I thought, Lord, give me this mountain. There have been other times in my life as well when I have thought, Lord, give me this mountain, when there has been a challenge that has confronted me that seemed that it would be almost impossible to overcome. I would look within myself and assess my resources and note those that were lacking and address the Lord concerning my weaknesses. Our lives, I think, are at times like a marathon. Other times they're simply like a hiking expedition through the mountains, with valleys, with mountaintop experiences, and others between them. One of the most moving stories in the Bible is the story of the Exodus, the pilgrimage of the former slaves, now a people, the tribes of Israel, from Egypt to what they saw as their promised land, Canaan. As they traveled, they had one of the same challenges that soldiers have on those long runs that competitive runners have in marathons, and that is maintaining spirit, maintaining morale, maintaining a sense of where you're going, and sometimes when you're on a long, challenging hike or run, why you're doing this. Some of you have worked on master's degrees or perhaps other degrees, and as you've come to near the end of that program and ever more challenging courses, you've asked yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I spending all this time and money on this effort? Then perhaps you've slapped yourself and reminded yourself why you're doing what your vision is for what you're going to accomplish with what you're gaining from this program. That helps you maintain your vision about where you're going. As congregations, we have that challenge too, don't we? Of maintaining vision as we travel through the desert. Remembering why we're doing what we're doing and where we're going. And just who are these people who are going with us? We don't think about this often in regard to the Exodus. But quite some time, decades and decades and decades had passed since a group of 70, a family, extended family, had gone down into Egypt. And now they were 12 tribes of around 600,000 men of fighting age, which was an important consideration. So about 2 million people perhaps. Many more than 70. I want to ask you, how do you get along with your 8th cousin? Do you even know who your 8th cousin is? Probably not. So, this is the experience of the tribes as they're leaving Egypt with all these people. Many of them are supposedly related to us. We're not really quite sure how, perhaps. And then there are some that we suspect have just sort of mixed in with us. They're trying to get out of Egypt. The Bible says they were a mixed multitude. It wasn't all Israelites that were leaving with them. There were some other people going with them, which made maintaining the vision a little harder because they were on a mission from God. God was driving this trip. And He was the one that knew why they were going and where they were going and who was leading the way. Moses was their leader. And one of the things we discover as we read the Bible is that at times there was skepticism about his role as leader. They didn't want to accept him. They asked, why him? And as I mentioned a few months ago in a sermon, on one occasion, even his older brother and sister asked that question. Why him and not us? There were moments when the morale of these 2 million people took a downward swing. And they really missed the days of being slaves in Egypt. Not the hard work and the long days and the lack of rest. But they missed knowing that they would have food supplied to them for their work. They missed some of the things that had been provided to them. They missed the security of knowing each day what was going to happen that day. Because if you do the same thing every day, it may get boring, but you know what's going to happen. But now they're out in the desert, going who knows where, with this guy who came out of the desert, who said he had a message from God. Think about that for a minute. Maintaining morale in a group like that, they didn't have cell phones. And as they started, didn't have television to maintain some sort of communication. And even as they began, we learned that they really needed more organization in terms of having people over smaller groups within the tribes. That eventually did happen. But as they traveled, they stopped and had a really frightening experience at Mount Sinai, where they gained what we call the Ten Commandments and other commands from God, more direction on how to live and how to and where to go. And then they started off for their objective, the land of Canaan. And despite some problems of running out of water and food and other troubles like that along the way that sent the morale plunging again, they eventually reached the southern reaches of the area where they were going. And that's where in Numbers chapters 13 and 14, the Lord comes to Moses and directs him to send a spy from each tribe, to send 12 spies up into this land to perform a reconnaissance mission, to see what resources are in that land, what people live there, what sort of cities they have built, what sort of fortifications surround those cities. In other words, what sort of opposition that they are going to encounter. Because it's not like they're going into an empty place and they're going to settle there. They're going into a land that's already been settled. Cities have been built. Farms are being tilled. How's that feel to the Canaanites, who are getting rumors that 2 million people are coming toward them through the desert? I think we have a sense of that, with newscasts over the last year or so about potential groups coming up from Central America. And alarm that some have had about that. The same sort of sense that the Canaanites might have had about the Israelites' approach. But in Numbers chapter 13, God speaks to Moses, and he says, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a chief among them." These are leaders. These are people respected among the people. They're not just lower ranked soldiers that are just picked out at random. But these are carefully chosen opinion leaders from the tribes. Most of these names we don't recognize. There's a reason for that. We'll get to that. Samuel, Shaphat, Caleb, Egal, Hoshea, we usually call him Joshua, Palti, Gadiel, Gadi, Amiel, Sether, Nabi, and Gua. Those were the 12 spies. The only two we remember are Caleb and Joshua. But the 12 of these go up through the land. And as they travel up northward through the land, they follow the directions that Moses had given them. Beginning with verse 17, it says here, Moses tells them, "Go up into the Negev and go up into the hill country and see what the land is, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, whether they are few or many, or whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, and whether the cities that they dwell in are camps or strongholds, and whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are trees in it or not. Be of good courage and bring some of the fruit of the land." Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. So they are to go and do this reconnaissance mission, and they are to bring back some evidence of the fruit that's being grown in that land, the products being grown there. And why would that be? So that the people will know that there is reason for them to go there, that this is going to be an improvement in their lot. And they go up there, and they go throughout the land, beginning with the desert region in the south, up through the mountain ridge, up the middle of the land, the desert region down to the south of it, the mountainous area in there, hilly area of desert, and then the fertile plains to the west, and finally to the mountains in the north. And on the way back, they gather grapes and figs and pomegranates, and they bring them back with them to the people. And they come back after they've been gone for 40 days. And they report that on the whole, this is an abundant land. That it flows with milk and honey. And this is its fruit. That's an expression of prosperity. This is not a desert land like that through which they've been traveling, but one where crops grow, where there's fruit, where there's vegetables, where they can graze their animals on the grass. It's a good place to live. However, don't you just hate howevers? You're getting really good news, and then he says, but. However. And so the spies do too. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. It's a giant type people. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the hill country. The Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. So this is not going to be a cakewalk. They're not just going to move in and start building. No, there's already cities, there's forts, there's people who live there. That Caleb quieted the people before Moses, it says in chapter 13, verse 30, and said, let us go up at once. Let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are able to overcome it. Caleb has faith. He believes that God has sent them on this mission, that God will help them to accomplish this mission. And so he tells the people, we are well able to overcome it. And then 10 others speak up who had gone. And they say, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers. And so we seemed to them. We're in a heap of trouble if we go up there, was their report. And theirs was the majority report. I mentioned maintaining morale. Morale is now horrible. And people accept the majority report. So you have these 600,000 fighters and their families out there, and almost all of them are saying, why are we here? We need to go back to Egypt. We need to elect new leaders. We need to stop this foolish trip. that is only going to get us killed if we keep traveling. And they pick up stones, and they're crying, they're weeping, and they are threatening to kill Moses and Aaron and Joshua and Caleb. The whole congregation says to them, "Would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or that we had died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better to go back to Egypt?" And so they said, "Let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt." What do you do if you're leading a group like that and there's a revolt? There's a revolt against faith here. Because God said to do this, they're saying, "No, we can't." Moses and Aaron, the prophet and the chief priest, just fall down on their faces. Prayer to the Lord and shock. Joshua and Caleb speak to the people. And they say in chapter 14, verse 7, "The land which we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, He will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them." And that's when the congregation, everybody else says, "Let's stone these people." Then the glory of the Lord appears, and it brings people to a stop and halts the stoning. And the Lord speaks to Moses and says, "How long will these people despise me?" And He wants to just wipe them over and start over. Wipe them out and start over. There's a revolt against the leadership. The people want to go back to slavery in Egypt rather than continue what they consider a foolish expedition. But Caleb and Joshua object. And they chart a course for faith. But what emerges from this revolt against faith is a middle route. They do not continue the invasion. They don't go back to Egypt. Moses lays out to them what's going to happen to them if they continue to rebel against the Lord. They repent. They want to say, "Okay, let's go. And no, it's too late. They're going to have to get ready. They're going to have to train to go. They're going to have to be spiritually prepared to enter this land. And the truth is, most of the adults are not going to make it. Because for the next 39 years, they're going to be wandering around in the desert out there, growing stronger spiritually and physically, learning how to survive, learning what the Lord's demands upon their lives are. Have you ever thought about how Moses, Aaron, Joshua, and Caleb felt at that time? You've got 600,000 men getting ready to throw rocks at you. It's pretty dire. I ran across heard a song by Avril Lavigne just this last week. head above water. A song that she wrote in 2014 when she was diagnosed with Lyme disease and had to quit singing, had to pretty much be in bed for 2 years. She thought her life was over. And she wrote this song. And I'll tell you, when I think of her, I don't think of prayer, but this is what this song is. It's prayer. Because she says, yeah, my life is what I'm fighting for. Can't part the sea, can't reach the shore, and my voice becomes the driving force. I won't let this pull me overboard. God, keep my head above water. Don't let me drown. It gets harder. I'll meet you there at the altar as I fall down to my knees. Don't let me drown. Drown, drown. Don't let me drown. So pull me up from down below, because I'm beneath the undertow. Come dry me off and hold me close. I need you now. I need you most. God, keep my head above the water. They were far from water, but that was how Moses and Aaron and Joshua and Caleb had to feel. Because the end of their lives seemed to be at hand. They couldn't see in the stormy weather, couldn't seem to keep it all together. As she would go on to sing. Needed God to sustain them. And so we too, as we travel through the desert of our lives, scale the mountains that we have caused, need God to help guide us through. As they had traveled, Caleb had seen land and then a mountain region. But he thought, this is my land. And as God spoke to Moses, reviewed the situation with him, he told Moses that none of the men who had seen his glory in the previous time would survive, but my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land into which he went, and his descendants shall possess it. So, 45 years later, the Israelites are now in that land that they've been promised. The generation that had revolted has died. Their children are the men that are fighting the battles, the women who are supporting them. And their leader is Joshua. And at his side, Caleb. And in Joshua chapter 14, Joshua as he's leading, is approached by Caleb. And Caleb reminds him of this experience about which we've been talking. And he says, the Lord has kept me alive, just as he said, while Israel walked in the wilderness. And now, behold, I am this day 85 years old, and I am still as strong today as I was in the day Moses sent me. My strength now is as my strength was then for war and for going and coming, so now give me this mountain. The time has come for God to keep his promises, for me to receive the reward. Is what Caleb said. Give me the opportunity to take this mountain that the Lord has promised me. In Hebrews chapter 11, we have this hall of fame of faith, and we expect us, by faith Moses We expect to read by faith Caleb, but he's not there. But it says, hence, that there are others who are not named. Others who go on because they seek a city without foundations. Because they are on a journey that we are on as Christians. And that only with us by their sides are they going to reach that destination. So now we are drawn into the story of Caleb and the Israelites, of Moses, of Joshua. And it says, all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, that apart from us they should not be made perfect. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 39 and 40. And then it says, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Where are we going? What are we doing? Yesterday, a woman died at the age of 37, named Rachel Held Evans. She wrote some things about the church in her life. And one of the things that she wrote sort of caught my attention. Imagine if every church became a place where everyone is safe, but no one is comfortable. Imagine if every church became a place where we told one another the truth. We might just create sanctuary. A place where we are united as the people of God, moving forward to achieve the mission that He has given us. So our challenge, as it was for Caleb, which he met, is to believe God's promises, to keep the faith even when others do not, when perhaps they jeer at us and scoff, and to keep focused on Jesus Christ and the promises that God has given through Him. And to say, Lord, give me this mountain. Help me to scale this hill that's standing between you and me. Help me to be your man or woman for this day. If you need today to become God's man or woman by being baptized into Christ, if you need to say, I want to be like Caleb, a man after the spirit that God desires, let us know now. Come while we stand and we sing.